In a small, remote village, there lived an old man named Arthur. Arthur was a skilled carpenter who was known for his beautiful and precise work. But there was a dark side to him that made people fear him. His house was full of strange works and mysterious artifacts, each with a scary story. One day, a young man named Jake decided to visit Arthur and learn from him about the art of carpentry. Jake had always been interested in Arthur's work and wanted to discover his secrets. When he arrived at Arthur's house, the old wooden door slowly opened, and Arthur looked at him with a tired face and dark eyes. Arthur said in his hoarse voice, "Welcome to my house, Jake. But before you enter, you should know that everything here has a price." Jake entered bravely and watched Arthur's work. He noticed that every object Arthur made was made with care and love, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of fear in the air. One day, Jake asked Arthur to take him to the basement to find out Arthur's scary secret. Arthur said with a worried look, "The basement is not a good place. There are things in there that are better left forgotten." But Jake insisted, and Arthur finally gave in. When they reached the basement, Jake noticed that the walls were covered with scary pictures and wooden dolls. In the middle of the room, there was a wooden coffin. Arthur slowly approached the coffin and said, "This coffin belongs to someone who lived here and was cursed for his deeds." Curious, Jake opened the coffin, and suddenly a groan was heard from inside. He stepped back in horror, and Arthur told him, "This spirit is always looking for revenge. He doesn't want to be forgotten." Jake was scared and decided not to go there again. But a few days later, Jake could not get rid of the thought of that coffin and the sound of its moans. He went to Arthur's house again, and this time demanded to know the secret of the coffin. Arthur said with a sad look, "If you want to know this secret, you will have to pay a price." Jake replied bravely, "I am ready." Arthur began to explain that the ghost inside the coffin was the soul of another carpenter who had suffered this fate because of his jealousy and betrayal of Arthur. He came out of the coffin every night and sought revenge on those who had betrayed him. That night, Jake returned to Arthur's house and could not sleep. The sounds of moans were ringing in his ears, and he could not escape the thought of the fugitive ghost seeking revenge. Suddenly, he heard the sound of his door opening. When he went to the door, he realized that Arthur was entering his house. Arthur said with a pale and worried face, "Jake, he is approaching you. You need to get out as fast as you can." Jake ran towards the door in fear, but suddenly he felt something pulling him down. In an instant, the ghost of another carpenter appeared before him. His face was scary and his eyes were angry. He told Jake, "You must pay a price. You have penetrated my secret, and now you must come with me." Jake was running away, but the ghost was getting closer to him. Finally, Jake returned to Arthur's house and asked him for help. Arthur said with his eyes full of fear, "The only way to save yourself is to return the ghost to the coffin. But it is dangerous." Bravely decided to cooperate with Arthur. They went to the basement and tried to return the ghost to the coffin, but the ghost attacked them with anger and force and threw Jake to the ground. In an instant, Arthur was able to return the ghost to the coffin using his carpentry tools. But at this moment, the ghost screamed and with a sudden movement pulled Arthur towards him. Jake saw with horror that Arthur was disappearing, and the ghost told him, "This curse will be passed on to you too." Jake was terrified and finally ran out of the basement and towards the exit. He never returned to that house and forgot about Arthur. But every night, the ghost's moans haunted him in his dreams, and he knew that Arthur's curse now belonged to him. Years later, when Jake grew up, he remembered Arthur and that cursed house. He could never escape that fear, and eventually, his life became a nightmare. Everyone who heard Arthur's name trembled with fear and knew that his story was still alive.